Okay, thank you everyone. So let's start. First of all, thank you very much for staying here up to the almost last talk of this Vox Bucharest 2024 edition. Of course, we still have the ending keynote, which I advise you attend after this talk. But thank you very much for staying up that late and attending this talk. I see you in a large number here, which is great. Today we'll have a talk about the APIs the JDK offers, and I will tell you later why I chose this talk and why I consider this will be useful for all of you. But just to begin with, I'm Laurențiu. You might know me or you might not know me. If you know me, you probably know me because of one of those books I wrote, or maybe the YouTube channel. Who's following me on YouTube? The others should as well, okay? So note it down. Click and subscribe. How's like and subscribe. And I will take an opportunity of 2 minutes to tell you, for those of you who are Romanian speakers, sorry for the slide in Romanian, but it will be an event for only Romanian speakers. 17th April 2024, I will have a book launch event. It's my first book in Romanian, Java, of course. If you want to attend, this is my first invitation. If you follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter, you will see many more. And yeah, just wanted to tell you that, make you aware. There will be Prosecco. Okay, let's begin with our talk today. I will try to be short, I will try not to get you bored, and because you stayed up this late, I'm gonna give also a prize. I'm usually giving a prize. So this paper copy of my third book, I will give it randomly to someone at the end. I will ask you if you want to scan a QR code, put your name, do some random ORG, and then give it to one of you, okay? Troubleshooting. So, we discussed about security, and I said I will start with why I chose to discuss this topic today. Who is here who has worked at least once with a Java collection, like list, array list? A lot of people. Streams API? Everyone. Date and time API? Security API? Not that many, no? So, security, like reflection API? Even reflection has been touched by more people than security APIs. So this is why I chose actually this talk. I want to make you aware. This is an awareness talk. I want to make you aware about the security APIs. I want you to know that they exist. I want you to know what they can do, at least at the basic level. And that will help you, first of all, knowing that you can do a lot of things out of the box with the JDK without choosing a third party. Like one of those three that you see there are possible third parties, but they are not necessarily needed in all the cases. You can do stuff without adding anything to the footprint of your application, and you will see those today. And of course, it's also about troubleshooting. Because if you want to troubleshoot something, you need to know all the aspects of your application, including security. The book is about troubleshooting. And if you have attended the previous talk in the other room, where Ana Maria discussed Java Flight Recorder for investigating security events, you might have seen some names that you will also recall in my presentation. Which means that if you use, for example, Java Flight Recorder to profile your application for security events, you might want to first know about what those events appearing there, like Cypher, for example, or Message Digest, what do they actually mean? Otherwise, those lines will not make sense, no? So, these are good alternatives. They offer you things that sometimes you need and you don't get out of the box. But if you have things that might be solved with features that are out of the box, then it's always recommended you use what you have And you don't add an alternative just to add an alternative. So if you do that, of course, with things from the JDK and with one dependency or more dependencies minus, you will have increased trust. You will decrease the footprint of your application. Very important nowadays when we deploy applications in containers, we put them in clouds, and why not we even implement them within Lambda functions in clouds that need to have a quick cold start, and that's why we also talk about native nowadays, native compilation, native execution, and so on. The less you have deployed there, the best for your containers and your applications. That's also one of the advantages of having modularity, which was introduced with Java 9 some time ago already. You might recall Jigsaw. And of course, you have seen Victor's keynote from this morning, simplicity is a key. The simpler your code is, the better. The simpler the structure of your application is, the better. The simpler the system is, the better as well. Although I will take the opportunity today to discuss a little bit of the things that Victor presented at the beginning of the day within the code in the Java Security API, which is not really considered to be the best in terms of practices. And you will see that immediately. Let's start with the smallest, maybe the most known of the things you can do with Java Security, cryptography. We have a few things that are part of the cryptography discussion, and you can do out of the box with the Java Security. But whenever you choose to do something, first of all, ask yourself if you are doing it in the correct way. We are very often today fooled about things that we find around the internet. Stack Overflow, other blogs where we take our inspiration, let's call it like that, from. And of course today, ChatGPT and other AI facilities. Like this is an example. Yeah, I just tried it a few days ago. I asked ChatGPT to give me a short use case implementation for something that implied using a random number. And it gave me this, which looks fine if you don't consider the fact that it uses math random there, which I would not recommend, for example. Which is fine, but it doesn't offer the guarantee of a true randomness. Are you using it in a tutorial example? Fine, it will work just fine, math random. Are you using it in real life where you really want to be sure you have a true random value? Then you should use secure random, for example. So I don't say, for example, ChatGPT is bad or good. I say that you should just filter out with your own mind all the information it gives you. In terms of cryptography, which is related to generating randomness, we do use secure random, which makes use of operating system entropy, for example, rather than using other capabilities such as the random class from Java util, or even worse, the static random method from the math class. Well, using secure random is quite easy. Like it's not something very difficult. You can use it to generate a random string very easily by also making use of, for example, base 64 encoding. Like, what does this code do? It's simply just taking an array of 16 bytes, generating some random data in those 16 bytes, and then if you want to see it as a string, simply encode it as a base 64. But anyway, it's made out of the box. Like, this secure random has plenty of methods to allow you to generate what kind of value you'd like. So for example, would you like to make it as easy as math random? This next double will give you exactly what math random will give you. Just that secure random will make sure it's a true random value and not something just generated to look like a random value. So that's the point. Okay, going back. But normally, randomness is just the simplest of the use cases. We do have other things that we are worried about, like symmetric key encryption, asymmetric key encryption, certificates and signatures. And all of these, fortunately, can be implemented directly by using the JDK. And every new version, the JDK offers new enhanced algorithms or deprecates the algorithms that are not considered secure anymore. So you can trust in the algorithms that are used by the security providers behind the scenes. So for example, it's very easy to implement asymmetric key encryption just by using the Java security module, and it uses standard algorithms. You can use standard algorithms like RSA, ECC, DSA, and so on. So going into a next example, well, this is a key pair generator. It generates you a key pair. Let's go back to the clean coding. This is something you should have seen this morning, no? Two things are bad here, actually, only in this small 3 lines piece of code. Let's make a recap. Who can tell me the 2 things that shouldn't have been there, but they are? RSA as a string, and the second? The checked exception. Good, good. So you can be proud. You definitely learned something, unless you already knew them, of course, but you definitely, please go on. Sorry? Yeah, no, that's just leftovers. They weren't part of my example, sorry. I'm not always just doing that. No. Yeah, but of course, don't leave unused imports. So, it will go even worse. First of all, it is a pity, but you will see the reason a little bit later, like in 5 minutes, I will show you why you don't have an enum, for example, for that. Because normally in your code, you would have probably put an enum and just provide in a easier to find out way which are the algorithms that are supported. If I'm just using their ABC or something that's not supported, I will just get a no such algorithm exception, which is bad because the way it was designed is as a checked exception. But hey, no one's perfect, no? So we have to deal with that. Now, normally, if I got an RSA algorithm here, you want to get the public or the private keys. So you'll do something like this, which is excellent as long as you only, this is private key, okay? As long as you only want to rely on the interface. But if you really want to use this as an RSA key, well, you have to specifically use here RSA private key. Not from Bousy Castle, sorry for that. This is not the one. And this is another problem that we should discuss. Okay, this is the one, Java security, no? It's what we... And of course, unfortunately, you will have to do something even worse. It's like cast that to the specific... There is no other way to do that. The way the Java security module is built. So if you find yourself using like that, and you feel bad, you feel crappy because of that, don't feel. It's not your fault, okay? Yeah, this is just a recap. The same with the public key. So you choose the algorithm, you have to provide the string, and then you have to cast to a specific, more particular implementation in case that's what you need. And trust me, in many cases you need to do that. But again, it's not your fault. And you have to find out how to treat that checked exception, which is also bad. But the reason, at least there is kind of a reason, not that it couldn't have been implemented better, but the reason is that way is because the way it started many years ago when we maybe didn't have the same amount of talk about how clean our code is and what principles are and what design is and what it means to be a good design or a bad design, it was still built in mind with flexibility, meaning that you didn't see you only saw me writing something get instance RSA, okay? And I could have used any algorithm there that I know it's supported by the JDK. But there are cases where they say, okay, what if there are algorithms that you want to implement by yourself? Or simply there are algorithms that the JDK don't support right now. And then the way this was implemented was having an implementation behind the scenes totally decoupled, which is called a security provider. So the girl who reviewed my presentation before was distracted about the muscle guy. Don't be, okay? So here, this is the important thing, okay? Probably many of you have heard about Bouncy Castle. Probably not so many have heard about the other two options. Bouncy Castle, have you heard at least about it? Maybe even used it or something? Okay, when and what exactly is Bouncy Castle and when do we use it, for example? Can someone give us a clue? Perfect, very well. You, Alin. So you want something, but what particular case? No, because signatures, that's provided also by the JDK. That's what I want to make you understand. In this case, for example, my previous example didn't use Bouncy Castle. Yeah, go. Okay, which is what? Something probably that you needed and was not provided by the JDK, which is exactly what our colleague from the other chair told us, which is the correct answer. Very good. So there are cases where you want to extend the capabilities. You can even create your own security provider. You can do that. In many cases, you will find whatever you need with one of the implementations like Bouncy Castle. And it's very easy. The point is, it's very easy to add it. So for example, you have a Maven or a Gradle project. You simply add your dependency. And the only thing you need to do is to use the security class to add your provider, which in my case would be Bouncy Castle, no? Whatever. So one line of code and one dependency, and by the way, never use latest here, okay? It's just for examples. So if, for example, I wanted to use, like today, the whirlpool hashing method, which is a little bit more exotic hashing method, for example, or some cryptographic algorithm that is not part of the default provided, then I choose to add Bouncy Castle or whatever suits my needs, or I implement my own security provider and I implement my whatever own algorithm. I don't necessarily recommend you do that. Usually implementing your own stuff in security is risky, to put it in a polite way. But you can do that because it's extensible. Whatever, let's continue with other capabilities. So symmetric key encryption, also very easy and cheap to implement unless you need something very exotic. If what you need is, sorry, this is hashing. If what you need is, for example, AES, which is not exotic at all, then it's already provided within the JDK. And if you have ever implemented, did you implement anywhere a capability that needed a symmetric key encryption, for example? Any of you? A few of you. And is any of you who used something else than AES? See, no one. So that's why I was saying probably it was more than enough to use the JDK. I hope you didn't use Bouncy Castle. Did you? Okay, that's good. Perfect. And then, of course, digesting, no, hash functions was here, symmetric, anyway, you saw both of them, okay? So digest like SHA or MD5, which I hope you don't use anymore, at least MD5, okay? But you can do it with the JDK. And then symmetric key encryption, which we were discussing. Same with using asymmetric keys, but this time for signing information that you want to send. all that JWT capability behind the scenes uses something like that. You want to be able to debug it when you need it, or you want to, why not, implement one of your own. I would advise you to try to understand what's the behind the scenes of it, which again is most likely part of the Java security package you would use. But it's also about communication, okay? And if, again, you were attending one of the previous talks that was right in that room just before this one, there was a part of a discussion about intercepting TLS messages. Now, TLS messages, the same, can be easily implemented through the Java security package. So this is a very simple example on building a server, and the only thing you need to be sure that you provide is, of course, the key store that you are using. I see you smiling there. Tell us your story. I believe you use that, yeah. You are not alone. That's the good news for you. Do you know what a key store is? What? Perfect. I would not say Java stores. Java is, in the end, just the language you use. I would say your application, no? Rather. And you can manage that with Java security as well. So, yeah, you implement it for any kind of secure communication. You know, you have the server socket and socket classes in the JavaNet packages. You might have used those. But you also have the SSL server socket and the SSL socket for the communication, and you have to provide, of course, on the server side the key store, and on the client side the trust store for enabling them. And if you were attending, if you didn't attend the previous presentation, I do advise you watch the recording. It would be very helpful, and combine this with the things I make you aware of now. You will definitely find it very helpful. To be honest, if I knew that those presentations, I would have put them in the reverse order, because it makes sense for them to be in the reverse order. And you told me that key store is the place where we store secret things such as the keys, no? And you can manage that, and you can you do secure it with a password. So you have capabilities to implement the management of the key stores also inside the Java security package. Pretty good, no? So if you don't know how to manage a key store, it's a line of code almost. What other capabilities do we have that you might or might not have used? The Java access control. And if I'm going to the what's called Java access control, there are two, as far as I know, key concepts that are part of this. And one of them is the security manager, and the other one is called the policy file. Have you heard about this? Security manager? This is actually on this slide today for only one reason. Can anyone guess what's the reason? You're not really aware into this part, no? So that's good for me, because it means that at least you found out something. This is deprecated. Starting with Java 17. I left on the slide also the JEP in case you want to read it. But for those of you who are old enough to have worked with the security manager, that's how you were doing it. It's like you were creating, you were actually either registering a security manager, or you were creating your own security manager, which was something like, if I correctly recall, extending the security manager class, which, yeah, is deprecated for removal starting with Java 17. So if you still have it in your applications, it's still working, but soon it will not. Normally, this security manager was implemented for cases. Maybe ask yourself, why was it deprecated? Because it doesn't really make sense anymore. So the reason it was added was that some time ago we were implementing sandboxing, and the easiest way was to somehow decouple all the rules related to the sandboxing somewhere. So it was, security manager was a way to decouple the logic, the security logic for your application. And you are finding this very often with, for example, Java applets. And Java applets are something that we are not using for a long time already. Of course, the security manager is something that you might have seen also a lot with any kind of capability where some Java application were somehow managing things inside it, like any application server, for example. If you used like Glassfish or something similar, you also might have dealt with security managers. But you also know that we are already not going into that direction anymore. So that's a good reason for deprecating this way of implementing a security. In the end, today, when we talk about security, what are you thinking about? Probably your Docker containers, your virtual machines. There are other ways in which we implement the rules for the sandboxing. However, in terms of policy files, you still have them, and you can define them, and you can have multiple policy files. This is just an example of how a policy file looks like. Okay. And it's a good way in which you can declaratively allow or disallow things on how your application works. So for example, if I want to allow a socket permission for my application that I have just created and for which I have implemented SSL communication or TLS communication the way I have presented a few slides earlier, then I would probably do something like that. If I want to allow or disallow with a specific type of access my application to read or write in a specific file, first line basically in the definition of the permission file is the way I would do that. So you might still find and you might still use this way of declaring permissions in your policy files, but of course it also implies the fact that you have to enable them, and this is in my case being an example. I didn't want to make it too long, but normally you can have multiple and merge them together. Yeah, and they have some advantages, like it's again declarative, you can define granular permissions, and it allows you to test, like I would use them, and I have used them mainly when I wanted to test my application acting in certain conditions but without affecting my application. So for example, you want to run your application and check what happens if you don't give it access to a file you know it needs to read. How does your application treat that exception? Does it treat it anyhow? Is it treating it in the correct way, and so on and so forth? Or your application needs to get access through an SSL socket, and you want to test what happens if for any reason, for example, network impediment, it's not able to do that. No, how can you do that? You start your application using a policy file, and then you block that socket, and then you see what happens with your application. Does your application treat that in a correct way? It's a way in which you do that. You have your application, you don't touch it, you just run it, and you can test how it behaves with different conditions without having to touch your application to test that. So that's why I find it pretty cool. And this way, of course, you can identify how your system components act in different conditions. And this is at the JVM level, because, of course, you might say, hey, can I do that with the container? Yes, you can do that with your container. Like, can I block the port directly on the container? Because I'm using Docker, I'm running my applications in Kubernetes, and I can do that. Definitely, maybe you can even do that. When testing an application, especially on the non-functional point of view, I always think about testing everything. So I'm not only testing, for example, ins and outs when it comes to the container, but I might want to test ins and outs when it comes to the virtual machine on which my containers run. And of course, why not? I can go even more granular, and I want to test how my Java virtual machine works and what happens with my JVM instance itself that is running inside the specific container. So that means it depends on how much you care about how your system goes and how much time you'd like to invest into testing, but I'm kind of a fan of testing the application the right way, and I think that investing time in testing your application makes sense. It always returns a good investment. Hopefully you hope the same. And I just left it to the end, and then we will play a bit to have one of you getting this book and get your tired faces out of this room. Java GSS API, which I left it at the end because, well, it's something more exotic, but I just wanted it to be here because it's still part of the Java security module that we discussed in this talk. So if you have, for example, if you want even an authentication abstraction, and I don't know if you knew that, but if you want an authentication abstraction over something like Kerberos, you might even have that through the JDK itself. And this is called the GSS API. So you will probably know, or you might know that this, let's say, kind of three actors communication, three actors diagram where you have the client, an authorization server, and the resource server kind of diagram, and say that we have that Kerberos distribution. You need to implement something like authentication through Kerberos. You can do that for your plain standard edition application without having Spring Security or anything fancier. And in some cases, it makes sense because, for example, if you have something small like, again, a function that is deployed in the cloud, it might make more sense than having to put your Spring Boot dependencies there and have to, say, compile it natively to make it cold start fast. That's debatable, I know. It depends a lot on the case. It's never, this is a best practice, a silver bullet, and do use that because otherwise you will do it wrongly. You all know that software architecture decisions, they always depend on the case and they have to be wisely analyzed. I remember also Ionut's talk from yesterday where we discussed the performance of the JVM, the throughput, and how much it consumes, and you remember the same. So depending on your application, even that is, it has to be specifically on the case verified. But there is a possibility to implement it through the JDK itself, and it's good because it, again, doesn't enlarge your footprint. It offers pure mechanism with authentication out of the box and good abstraction, and it offers delegation to the Kerberos. Okay, this comes later, but this is what I want you to scan now. No, it's not. No, and I'm only taking your name, so no private data. I promise I will delete the shit where I have that after immediately after our talk. Of course, that's what I promised also 3 years ago. It's still there. I'm joking. No one will use your names. It's just for this random game of ours here, so I can give one of you a paper book. Is it working? Tell me it's working. And for those of you who will see the recording later, it will not work anymore. Sorry for that. Should I wait for anyone else, or can I go on random something and find out who will be the happy winner of this absolutely beautiful collection of knowledge written by me? I guess I can go to something like random, like that. okay? And I can go here and see many people. Let's put it a little bit bigger here. And I can see I'm number 2, so I'll start with 3, with row 3. That was just my test. 3 to 92, okay? 3 to 92. 80. Oh no, 80 is Adrian C. Perfect, congrats, woo! So, Adrian, you are the lucky winner. If you want later, you can find me for a signature. Thank you very much. And are there any questions that I might be able to answer before ending the talk? Or otherwise, of course, you can find me on social media. Please, go on. Have you ever used these little methods? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I did see them. I did use them, I did code with them as well. Specifically in some libraries or modules that were used by some projects. So they were modules defined specifically to be used by, imagine your kind of own implementation of security, like generating keys and stuff like that for your specific project that does something, connects to I don't know, some kind of device and stuff like that. DSSL, for example, specifically, I have used it when connecting to a device that was more exotic. To put it like that, so it's something you would not necessarily find everywhere. Something like an elevator. Okay. So yeah, there are cases, and especially even wherever I didn't use them directly, I did find use of knowledge them whenever I found an exception like JavaNet something, IO something, and you see something like SSL TLS, keystore doesn't work. Ooh. Do I know what a keystore is? Yes, I know what a keystore is. Please.
GSS API is like a specification, and then the Kairos part is the implementation.
Not really. Like you can connect. Like I have tried an example here, but it would have needed me to configure Kerberos itself. Oh no, sorry. Yeah, it's a little bit more complex, but it's not just it's a specification. Imagine like exactly like Entity Manager Factory and Entity Manager for the Hibernate part. You know, you still have that code, and you use that to work, but you need an implementation for that. But let's talk it more in details if you want. Normally, yes, it can be used with others. So, for example, Windows. How was it called for the Windows? Because I don't recall. Yeah, exactly. That's it. So yes. Cool. Please.
How much did this module change from Java 20 something to Java 21? And how do you see?
At least the design mistakes it seems to be kept. But yes, it does change. It does change in terms of they have always added new algorithms, and of course deprecated the ones that shouldn't be used anymore. And last time I went into what came new was actually last fall. So last fall I saw a talk about the latest algorithms that have been added at the time. So it is supported, and there is a team behind it that implements and keeps it updated with the newest algorithms and eliminate normally the ones that are considered vulnerable. So it's not something that's dead or something, it's in continuous development. So leaving the joke aside, anyway, it's normal, it keeps the full flows in the design because you cannot change that anymore easily at least. But it is in continuous implementation and development. Cool. Yeah. When's the next book coming out? Second edition is next week for Spring Security in Action. And the other one you saw, I do invite you on the 17th of April if you are free and want to have a Prosecco together and talk more about whatever you want Java. and have a book, even if it's in Romanian and only for students, because that's the way I designed it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you at the moment, at that time. Thank you very much, everyone, and hope to see you.